Hello all, and thank you for taking the time to watch this reflections video. Sadly, due to COVID-19, I can't actually do this in the format I would have preferred. So you'll have to imagine either woodland, a nice waterfall, maybe raindrops on a lake or a mountain range behind me, but yeah, you're just going to have to make do with the images in question. This Upon Reflection series, or should I say this video, it's not going to be a series, is the end of my scheduled Friday videos because, as I say, with this lockdown, next 2 to 3 months I'm not going to be doing anything but working and home life basically. I wanted to take the time to explain about the series of videos from the adventure and where I could have done things better, where I did do things better, and where I did things completely wrong. Going from the start, obviously, the train ride was wonderful, as always. I always enjoy a good train ride. The placement bus service really did knacker me up at the very start though, and that was one of the starts of the big disaster that would be the entire trip. Getting off that bus and feeling so gut-wrenchingly sick because of the way the bus ride had been. I mean, that snippet is just one of the long straight sections of road, but the road up into the mountains and the villages he had to go through, it really did just mess up my stomach a fair bit. So by the time I got into Betis, I wasn't in the mood to eat, which is, as I say, where the failure began. Not eating enough and moving off straight away meant that I didn't have the proper amounts of salt or fat in my body to sustain me for the kind of walk that I was going to go on. I'd already planned to stop and eat. It was pivotal to the entire trip, if you will, that after getting up at 7 AM and having breakfast, I would have to eat by midday when I arrived at Betis. That's a failure in my part. I should have just waited around a bit till I felt a bit better and then eaten. Now, as for part one, as you saw, some beautiful scenery, great walk. I made it to the end of video number one. It was great. I was enjoying the scenery. I had a quick snack at the end of video one. But obviously it wasn't high enough in proteins and salts, fats to sustain me, so progressing into video 2, I started to get, well, I wouldn't say cramps, but fatigue related pain and injury in my knees as I progressed up into the mountains. Moving forward from that, it just became a bit of a slog. I could tell my body wasn't functioning as well as it should. I was still enjoying myself, I was still enjoying the views, the adventure of it all, to just go and do what I'd been planning to do for a long time. I mean, I'll flash up an image on the screen of what my overall planned adventure was going to be, but I didn't achieve that. I didn't even come close. I mean, I'm still happy I went. I'll get into that later. Towards the end of video number 2, I'm making it up to that picturesque lake that I went to in August last year, Crafnant. It's a beautiful place. I mean, even though it's the wrong time of year and a lot of the vegetation isn't there still, it's still a wonderful place to be. And I didn't see a soul after video 1. In fact, video 1 was the only one I actually saw people in just before I got food. After that, I didn't see a soul until the next day when I got out of there. Video 3, as it started, halfway up the mountain, the same place I felt uneasy last August. There's a point on the mountain, I'll try and highlight it in an image. It's, I don't know, it's very strange. There's no birds, the forest is very close, and I might do a video next Friday talking about a selective fight or flight video. But something about that section just triggered it with me. Maybe it was the coming storm that I was going to endure, but who knows. Progressing onto video 3. Oh, we're in video 3. Duh. With video 3, obviously looking in on it, it was doomed as soon as I got to that point I got to last time. And although I had organised my piss be gone baggies and I was fairly confident once I got past that point, I should have, this is where my decision making comes into it, I should have realised that it wasn't going to work beyond that point and turn back. I can admit that, I'm a fully grown adult, I can say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done what I did, but the thrill of the adventure and the fact that I was finally doing it and making it further than last time spurred me on, and I naively didn't take into account the terrain, the weather recently at that time, and just the condition of the mountain in general. I'd been warned about that section, and I still went under the assumption that because we'd had a couple of good days, a good week of good weather up there, that it might have cleared up enough for me to go. And that's my failing. Again, I'll try and find some images that do what I had to go through justice, but basically that section at the top of the mountain that I had to cover for my first day was only a mile and a half, 2 miles at most, but that sapped the most time and energy out of me because it was all just, the dirt was just water and dirt, so if you stepped anywhere but tree roots your foot would sink straight down and you'd go in up to the knee easily. And like I said on the last trip, as a solo walker you can't take risks with that, so that section just sapped all my time and energy trying to plot a route through. I mean, it's virtually a straight line halfway and then it curves up round an abutment of the mountain, if you will. Crossing the fence at the end of that section, as you'll see, I get to an open area which then progresses up the final part of that mountain to the point where you go over the top and down the other side. And that was the original plan to camp there, but after getting there and realising that most of that area was just flooded out, obviously you have to aim for higher ground under that circumstance, and this is another failing of mine, was that I decided to go with a tent. Obviously a tent has its own limitations as well as benefits, that you have to have a clear square space to put the tent in, otherwise you risk damaging the base of the tent, which is the whole point in having a tent, is so that you have a dry bathtub situation, if you will, so all your equipment and you will be dry from the ground and the weather above. Something that a tarp can do, but not very well. I wish, in hindsight, again this is beautiful hindsight, that I had just gone with the tarp, because my options would have been so much more than what I eventually had to settle with. I could have turned back, I could have gone anywhere. I'd seen a couple of places that the tarp may have been preferential and actually probably would have worked very well, and I could have potentially gone, seen how bad it was, and then turned back the next day, made my way off the mountain that way, and I wouldn't have got myself into the situation I did. But I was foolishly dead set on using the tent that I'd taken with me. This is where, again, decision making, I, rather than turning back, seeing the conditions, I pushed on to higher ground, which again I can admit now was a foolish mistake, but staying where I wasn't viable. Going back wasn't viable in my mind at that point because of the lateness of the day. I should have, in hindsight, I should have turned back, found somewhere with my tarp or with my tent, and settled down for the night and then returned the way I'd come and got off the mountain that way. But foolishness and boyish adventure just took control. Making it to that first broken down settlement, and I do apologise for not doing much filming, but after getting into some bother in the large water bowl at the top of that mountain, it sapped a lot of my enjoyment out of it, and ongoing fatigue and injuries were causing a lot of downward spiraling morale, and I was just getting a lot more fed up with it. Getting to that first structure and seeing it all bogged out and losing light, it really did cause a hole in my morale, and I just started to really think I'm getting myself into trouble. Seeing the next potential spot down the other side of the mountain, the way I was headed, lifted my spirits a little, because I could see that it was virtually flat. on the OS map on my phone, and that was my best option at that point. But as you know, unfortunately, getting from ruin number 1 to the place I eventually stayed caused a accident for me. I took a little bit of a fall, as you know, right foot on dirt disappeared, and basically it was only maybe half a metre to a metre, but with the weight of my pack, the weight of me, just going straight down onto that rock, and my left foot being pulled and my right hand being snagged on something as I tried to catch myself. That was the breaking point for that day, really. It took me a good minute or so to just get my senses back and pick myself up and do a body check, make sure I was okay, and truth be told, my foot didn't hurt that bad. My knee was giving me a bit of jip from being pulled backwards when I fell, but overall it was just my hand causing me a lot of suffering. So I continued, I made camp, made contact with people to make sure if necessary they could be on standby to evac me from the side of the road. But ultimately, up in those environments, if you're on your own, you've got to get out of there. You've got to be able to self-extract, shall we say. I've never been in a position where I would need to be rescued off a mountain directly, as in people come up onto the mountain range to get me. I've always been very cautious, very careful about that sort of thing. But as we know, I woke up on day 2 and the injury to my foot was quite a bit more severe than I had originally realised. The 5 to 6 mile walk around Lyn Cowlid, progressing around the range to then head up onto Carned Llewyddian, which is the mountain range I was meant to go over, as you'll see in the images. Basically, I knew I wasn't capable of that just on a fact of gear, the weather conditions. As I say, I hadn't considered them fully, and it was then time to evacuate. A lot of discomfort had been caused, oddly enough, because of my fitness regime. I did speak about it briefly in the pack, that in the video number 3, that my exercise regime had caused my shoulders, where they join to my neck, to become quite large. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination I'm a beefcake and, you know, Mr. Universe for 2020, but I've made considerable gains to my physique that have caused the shoulder straps of the bag to rub, which caused considerable damage, shall we say. I sent an image to my partner and it's basically my shoulders are red raw. So the next day I had to wear a shamag over them, and I had to limp down the mountain with my right foot basically just in agony. This of course delayed me in my evac time, which meant I had to then take a detour. But ultimately I made it down the mountain quickly and safely as possible, and that's the end goal of it all, is that you've got to get out of there safely. There's no point going on the adventure if you're not going to make it home at the end. Talking about the pack, obviously it is a reasonable pack, but if you've got a lot of medium weight bulk or a lot of stuff that's quite heavy but doesn't quite fit with the bulk around it, it's an awkward situation that my Bergen probably would have handled quite well, because the Bergen, being just one giant bag with 2 giant bags attached to it, means that you can work out your lightweight bulk from your heavyweight bulk with a relative ease, unlike the narrow tall pack. But again, that was something that I hadn't fully counted on. I hadn't fully prepared myself in that respect, which is why I even did a video on it for my preparations for adventure series, saying you've got to test your pack, but I didn't counter on the weight balancing issue, which is a failing in my part. Having said all of that, under the circumstances, finding myself in a position where going back seemed like a non-option and going forward was, in my mind, the only option, if I hadn't have fallen, I probably would have I still would have had to evacuate, because I still had waterlogged boots and no spare shoes of any kind with me. So I couldn't have proceeded over the mountain range because it was covered in snow. That would have just been a recipe for disaster. So all things told, it still would have been a negative scenario. I'd have still had to pull out. But it hasn't dampened my spirits completely. I'm still looking into these sorts of things. I still want to do this journey. Like I say, it's been on my mind for years. I've been thinking about this long walk that would, give me bountiful experiences and make me feel rejuvenated in every way, because I get cabin fever being stuck at home, which I'm going to be for the next few months. But that trip was amazing in respect up until the point where I got to last time in August. But I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I can and can't do, about what I can achieve. It made me realise that I'd gone a little bit loopy with my self-imposed requirements for comfort and other. Like, I believed I had to have certain elements like hard cover around me, and I had to have certain equipment with me, and unfortunately, due to my youngest stealing a load of my stuff, I didn't have certain equipment with me that I could have done with. But I did learn a great deal about my comfort levels, my abilities, my wants and desires in regards of that sort of thing. And I'd like to think that come the end of this COVID-19 outbreak, I will be back out there again doing something maybe not so strenuous. I realised that one of my big disadvantages was I set the goal too far. 12 to 13 miles or 9 miles on the mountain with limited time doesn't give you the time to enjoy the scenery you're going through. And I realised that by video 2 at the minimum, because I realised as I was eating I was falling behind on my own schedule. And I say it in video 2 that I always walk too fast and I always push myself too hard, and it was definitely true. I rather ruined what would have been a beautiful walk through some amazing scenery with that. But that's the constraint you have to live with travelling via train and bus, is that you have to go by their timetable, which the earliest you can get into the mountains is 11:30, 12 o'clock. So you lose effectively half of the daylight from the get-go. But there may be ways around that. Ways I will be looking into. So, if anything I want you to take away from this video is that, yes, it looks beautiful, but even if you're only a couple of miles away from civilization at any given time in Snowdonia, the right set of circumstances can and will F you up or kill you. One of the special emphases I want to go on is waterlogged ground. I was going to do a video this week where I went out to a place that I know is suffering with it quite badly, but obviously they're saying minimum travel only. And as a key worker, I'm not willing to risk the safety of my family just for a quick joyride and a video. So that's basically where we're up to. I loved the messages and the comments and everything, and a lot of you were right. I've had multiple people mention it that I should never have gone alone. But the unfortunate thing is I don't have anybody who is willing to go on these sorts of adventures with me. My brother is interested in the idea, but he is not capable of doing the walk because of his health. And it just limits it in every other way. I don't have anybody who's on my timetable, as you will, because I've got other people I know, but none of them can match my work rota or my holiday rota. So going it alone was really my only option, other than to sit around waiting in the hope that someone else came, which is what I did before I went. It killed me that every time I'd make plans with people and they'd say, yeah, we're going on this day, I'd gear up, and then they'd call it off at the last minute. Or they wouldn't even tell me they were doing that, and I'd be waiting like a divhead just to find out they weren't going to come. And ultimately that's what pushed me to just do it on my own. but as we know, that has its limitations and its safety concerns, so all you can do is practice safely as you can. I've prattled on quite a while, haven't I? But yeah, upon reflection, I do have positive memories of the trip. I really regret not getting a picture of it, but on the night I was looking out of the tent doorway towards the mountain range I was meant to go over, and in the beautiful moonlight, like I didn't even need a torch at night to see because it was just so clear and so crisp in the moonlight. I could see the snow covered mountain range that I was meant to be going up, and my only regret is I didn't get a photo of that, but I've got it in my mind forever. But it's one of them, it's catch-22. I hurt myself, it didn't go to plan, limitations were met, but I'm still enthusiastic about it all. I still see potential, but I think I might have to change the plan, or maybe sort out a new travel method so I can get up there earlier, so I can enjoy the first day more. Because when you just set to a timetable, it eliminates a lot of the fun out of it, and by the time you're struggling to find somewhere to set up, that really does irk me. It affects me deeply that anything should be rushed or not finite, because getting somewhere and then struggling to find a shelter set up, it can really affect your morale, because the whole point was to get up there, find somewhere to set up, and then do a load of interview style videos again, like I wanted to do for this one but couldn't, because it would have been nice to have that style to add to the already attempted style that I'd done in the videos. But again, my own goal ruined my creative abilities in that one, and that's something else that irked me about this series of videos. But it won't be the last time I try. I'm going to take a long time to think about it, a lot more planning, and I'm just going to have to really sit down and go over everything before I try this sort of thing again. Thank you all for watching. I hope I haven't bored you, and I would love to hear what you think in the comments.